It's now been 19 days since the bodies of 19-year-old twins Kadir and Nazir Lewis were found on a hiking trail on Bell Mountain in Hiawassee, Georgia. 19 days. And guess what? I'd love to tell you there's a fucking update, but there's not. We still are no closer to finding out what happened to these young men. The twins were found shot to death on March 8th by a hiker who found them just off of a trail on Bell Mountain. Now, the original preliminary investigation, so the police that arrived on the scene, and the original statement from the Georgia Bureau of Investigations was that this must be a schmuicide, right? Where one unalives the other and then unalives himself. However, the family pushed back, and frankly, so do the rest of us. And we're waiting to get news on what's going on, what the latest is, but this certainly isn't getting the coverage it should get. In fact, if you try to Google, like I just did this 5 minutes ago, if you try to Google any news about this story, what are the latest updates? You see 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, and the only latest update is that there was an arrest of a volunteer firefighter who was, I guess, called to the scene. He took photos of the scene and then gave them, sold them, did something. He distributed them in some way, shape, or form. So he was arrested for obstructing the investigation. That's it. Nothing else. I have downloaded the Channel 2 News app and the 11 Alive app, which are both local stations here in Atlanta. And I did find on the 11 Alive app, they have a search function. So I searched, and it's the same thing. They haven't updated the story since March 19th. And it's the same thing. It's all talking about, well, the family is basically calling bullshit, which so do all of us. This doesn't seem to be the situation where it would be unalive of other and then unalive of self, because these were twins. They were friends. They cared about each other. They took care of each other. And why the hell were their bodies found on a mountain that they'd never been to, on a hiking trail they never would have been on, that was 2.5 hours away from their home, on the same day that they were supposed to be on the opposite side of town, taking a flight out of town, going to visit a friend in Boston? And I know maybe I'm just being overly skeptical, but there's just something about this that stinks to the high heavens. And if it were true, let me just say this, like hypothetically, if these were a couple of troubled young men, or they'd gotten in some sort of trouble, or something happened, and this was the situation of a true schmuicide, we'd know that by now. The case would be closed. The autopsy would show that, yes, they died of gunshot wounds. They would show that one of them had gun residue on his hands. There probably would have been a gun found at the scene, right? Because, the gun doesn't up and run away after both people are dead. There would have been a gun found at the scene. They would have done ballistics and proved that the bullets from the gun match the gunshot wounds in the two victims. But then also they probably could have traced that gun and said, oh, yeah. One of the twins bought this gun 6 months ago. I've not heard any of that. Have you? I mean, they could close this. They could tell the parents, I know this is really hard for you to hear, but based on this evidence, this is a closed case. They could say, well, you know what? We have 7 different traffic cams capturing them during the over 2-hour drive up to the mountains. They were alone in the car. They were under their own free will. They drove themselves up to the mountain. They parked the car and they walked up to the trail and committed this thing that they did. Sure, there'd be evidence that that's what it was. I'm just an old white lady from the suburbs. I'm not a cop. I'm not an investigator. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not any of those things. And I'm not a family member of the Lewis twins. But I got to say to you, listen, I think there's a killer on the loose in Hiawassee, Georgia. I do. And the GBI isn't solving the case. And maybe they are, but they're not giving any updates. People come into my comments and like, you don't know what questions the police are asking. Normally, the police tell us. If the police really want to solve a crime, they're on TV and they're saying, if anybody has seen, there was a witness that said this vehicle was seen leaving the scene. Or if anybody saw them driving up the highway, please come forward. If they were truly investigating this, we would fucking know. I don't think they are. They were hoping to close this right quick as a schmuicide and hope no one would ask any fucking questions. Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to ask them. 19 days. 19 days, and they still haven't even been able to tell us what they think it was. They can't confirm. Simple gunshot residue test on the hands would tell us a whole shit ton. What are the ballistics of the gun? Tell us a whole shit ton. Were there footprints? Did it look like one person was going against their will? Was there anything in the car like blood splatter or sweat or hair or skin cells that would show like a fight, like one dragged the other out of the car? Do we see that anywhere? We're not hearing any of that. Wouldn't you, if that was the case, if this was an unaliving of another than an unaliving of myself, that should be wrapped up very quickly with a bow. Why isn't it? Why isn't it? The autopsies are done. The medical examiner has not said yet what the cause of death is. That's suspicious because, again, if this were a schmurder schmuicide, open and fucking shut, they could prove it in 5 minutes. They could release the information from the investigation in 5 minutes, and they haven't. I'm just asking the questions that none of our local news stations or any national press is asking of the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. Why isn't somebody calling these guys every single day? What's going on? What's going on? Why aren't they being forced to hold press conferences every single day to tell us where they're at in this investigation? Because as far as I'm concerned, this is probably a homicide investigation. And the residents nearby, wouldn't they be panicked? I mean, wouldn't you think, oh my God, someone's on the loose? I'm telling you, this is deeply, deeply suspect. And this family deserves justice.